Tracy K. Smith, we are just so thrilled to have you here as our commencement speaker tomorrow. It is just our great honor.
I am honored. I'm so delighted and grateful to be here.
And I've also heard that you're a native of Massachusetts, that you're from Falmouth.
Yes, I was born in Falmouth.
Okay, well that's exciting. You are such a renowned poet. You have won the Pulitzer Prize in poetry for your book Life on Mars. Your memoir, Ordinary Light, was nominated for the National Book Award, and I think is another powerful piece of writing. And then to be named the Poet Laureate, and to be renamed the Poet Laureate again this past March. You've talked about poetry as a way to heal differences in a world that's divided. You've talked about poetry being a rehumanizing force, and I love that statement. In Wade in the Water, you have a poem that speaks to the idea of being held in that instant of common understanding. Can you tell us a little bit about what being Poet Laureate means to you and how you see poetry healing for the world?
Yeah, well, the charge of the Poet Laureate is to raise the public awareness to an appreciation of poetry. I feel so passionately that poetry makes us better people. I think it teaches us how to listen to ourselves, which there's a lot in our lives that seems to prevent from happening more often than one would hope. And it encourages us to listen to other voices and to patiently do the work of comprehending something that another person has experienced and been moved to speak about. I feel that the moment we're living in is characterized by a lot of frantic energy, a lot of high adrenaline debate, and what feels like less listening than would be ideal. And I feel like poetry could help us to shift gears and to say, there is a time to be humble, and there's a time to imagine that someone else might have an insight that could be valid and useful that I just haven't thought of yet on my own. So talking about poems, talking about the different faculties that they activate in us and the vocabulary that they give us for feelings that we live with without often describing, I'm excited to be doing that right now.
I think it's just so powerful because I'll tell you, as a physician, I feel so powerfully that the art of listening is so central to caring about the person in front of you, or to caring about the world, and to think about that in relationship to the art form. I think there's that close connection.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's a different skill than we're often encouraged to cultivate, because we're encouraged to kind of seize authority and to, learn and become persuasive and convincing and have all the answers and be able to demonstrate them. But I think that greater art or skill is to be able to say, what's real for you? What do you need?
And the humility. I mean, that's so important. So you're the Roger S. Berlin Class of '52 professor in the Humanities and the director of the Creative Writing Program at Princeton. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We have here at Wellesley a really rich and engaged community in the arts, and particularly in poetry. We have Frank Bedard, who just won the Pulitzer Prize, and of course Dan Chasen, who's a good friend of yours, and Marjorie Agosin. What is your advice to young people who are really looking to find their voice?
I think that as an artist, finding your voice is this huge milestone that you're waiting for so long. In my own experience, I think I began to find my voice when I stopped looking for it, when I said, okay, these are the poets whose voices I love that I'm going to try and learn whatever I can from. Often for me that meant imitating them, and of course you never sound like another person, no matter what you do.
That's right.
And I think I developed some skills that were going to be useful to exploring the material that was important to me I think material is that other, component. When you have a sense of what your questions are and what your passions are and what kinds of unrest might motivate you to sit down and write a poem and listen in that way, I think that's a huge part of what one's voice sounds like, what it's made of. So.
I read in your memoir that really your college experience was very important. Tell us a little bit about that in poetry.
Yeah. This time of year, commencement makes me nostalgic for that feeling.
Yeah.
I felt so overwhelmed when I left home by what I was expected to be learning, by the people that I was meeting, and so excited and intimidated by the classes that I was taking that were changing my view of the world. And poetry offered me kind of power. It showed me that if I could look closely enough at anything, even something small and seemingly unimportant, and if I could ask the right questions and listen patiently, I could discover something. And that was a consolation to me during a time when life is changing so rapidly. And I felt that, all of the other questions that I was sorting out as a, private person and also as a scholar could be synthesized by a poem, by thinking closely and, steadily about something. So poetry became a kind of anchor for me. I love that poems can give you a sort of private sense of investment in, the public world and history. It can slow down the experience of real time so that even when you're writing about your actual life, you can move around more slowly within it and more attentively. And I felt like that was incredibly useful.
One art form that has become very popular, and here at Wellesley, we've been an award-winning slam poetry group. Our group came in fourth, actually, in the international competitions, and I believe it's only the second time a women's college has come in those finals. It's becoming a very popular art form. What are your thoughts?
I love that performance poetry or spoken word, it brings us back to the oral tradition that poetry derives from, and it allows for the dramatic elements of performance to enhance what's happening in the text of a poem. I'm always excited because I have students who I work with in a workshop where we're looking down at pieces of paper in the classroom and talking about craft. And then they can take these very same poems and breathe a completely different sense of energy and vitality into them through performance. I think it gives a poem two lives. And,
Interesting.
A poem in some ways, the written poem is almost like a score for the reader to insert their breath and their sense of pacing. And, there's also that, private material of your own that you kind of allow to pass through the poem that's coming from someone else. That's one life of a poem, and then the other life is what the poet might envision and enact. I think it's exciting. I think it's reaching a different audience, and it's making people excited about different possibilities within language.
No, it's just truly remarkable, and I agree. It's really engaging such a large cross section of young people, which I just find so exciting.
It's giving a really beautiful. People bearing witness to their lives. Very young people who are very accomplished in the art form are talking about what's been real to them, what's been traumatic, what's been exhilarating, what they've learned, what the world might become. And I think it's really exciting. It's empowering.
So I know that women writers have been very important to you, and one person that you've talked about is being influenced by Lucille Clifton.
Yes.
And, I think that tradition of really bold, courageous women writers, women artists are truly inspirational. Can you tell us a little bit about how you see yourself in dialogue with that tradition?
Oh gosh, well, Lucille Clifton was my teacher when I was a grad student, so I feel very fortunate to not only have lived with her poetry, but lived with her voice and her stories, the things that she told us to encourage us as writers, and the insight that she gave us as to where some of her great poems came from. I love her, what I think of as her cosmic sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, throughout the course of her career, her poems are really thinking about Black experience in history, in myth, and I think there's even a perspective of Blackness that governs her sense of ecology. And then there's this cosmic, fearless, I don't know, she's receptive to that which is not human. I love a cycle of her poems called The Message from the Ones. And she described spending time feeling like she was in dialogue with another source that was telling her, you know, it's urgent for humankind to change. And that love is something that needs to be dealt with. I know that there are a lot of writers who believe that we're listening perhaps to other layers of ourselves, the unconscious mind, or, you know, like less obvious feelings or ideas that we might have. But I love that Lucille Clifton was also able to say, I do that, but I'm also listening to the beyond. I'm listening to the universe. And I think that's, you know, a huge wish that we might not be willing to own up to, because it's vast, it's terrifying, and it's, you know, unprovable.
Right.
And yet those poems feel realer than so many other things.
Right. And I guess, you know, as I think about life on Mars, which I know, you know, as you think about your own life and your father working on the Hubble, but in many ways that also it's beyond ourselves.
Yeah, it's a book that's, I think, looking out there, saying,
Right.
is what are we a part of? Is it God? Is it something else? And you know, the wish that drives that book is to make contact with something, even if it's just momentary.
Right. So tell us a little bit about Wade in the Water,
Okay.
and just how the style, how you decided to use actual text to really transform it into poetry. How did that all happen?
I think one of the core or central poems for the book is a book about the Civil War. It's called I Will Tell You the Truth About This, I Will Tell You All About It. And it was almost an accident. I was invited to participate in an exhibition of poems and Civil War portraits, and I had to find a way into the Civil War. I hadn't, you know, thought eagerly about that moment in American history, and I said to myself, I wonder what Black soldiers felt like. I wonder what their experience, you know, was shaped by, many of whom were fighting while enslaved. And I found some really powerful sources. I found a number of letters that were collected in a book called Families and Freedom. And it was just hundreds of letters that soldiers had written to their wives and their mothers and their children, and that they and their families had written to President Abraham Lincoln during the war asking for help in some way. And those voices, they were 150 years old, but they sounded so current. And, you know, these were urgent appeals, and so people had drawn up really beautiful metaphors in an attempt to be persuasive, and I think also an attempt to just name what they were feeling, which was this huge sense of hope and upheaval. And there was also a series of depositions that veterans and their widows and their descendants had given after the war, sometimes well into the 20th century, in an attempt to claim the pensions that they ought to have been entitled to. And that was, it was heartbreaking to read these statements. And it was also, I felt proud in a way of the sense of dignity and belief in, you know, what democracy could be. And also the lives that, you know, despite so many injustices, survived and contributed in such huge ways to this country. And I just wanted to gather those voices together. And having done that, I thought, well, there are other regions of history that it might be interesting to listen to alongside these voices. And so, while there are many poems in Wade in the Water that are me talking, I like that there are these other presences that kind of create a sense of, I don't know, a structure, a frame.
Is there any particular poem that you could share with us?
Sure.
And read for us?
Yeah, I'll read the title poem.
That would be wonderful.
I like to read that poem because the book is about many things, but I think it's mostly about love and compassion, and this is a poem that really embodies that. And it comes from attending a ring shout in Georgia, and having an experience with one of the performers. Wade in the water, for the Geechee Gullah ring shutters. One of the women greeted me. "I love you," she said. She didn't know me, but I believed her, and a terrible new ache rolled over in my chest, like in a room where the drapes have been swept back. "I love you. I love you," as she continued down the hall past other strangers, each feeling pierced suddenly by pillars of heavy light. "I love you," throughout the performance, in every hand clap, every stomp. "I love you" in the rusted iron chains someone was made to drag, until love let them be unclasped and left empty in the center of the ring. "I love you" in the water where they pretended to wade, singing that old blood-deep song that dragged us to those banks and cast us in. "I love you," the angles of it scraping at each throat, shouldering past the swirling dust motes in those beams of light that whatever we now knew we could let ourselves feel, knew to climb. Oh, woods. Oh, dogs. Oh, tree. Oh, gun. Oh, girl, run. Oh, miraculous, many gone. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. Is this love the trouble you promised?
Beautiful. Thank you. That was just beautiful. This whole theme of love, compassion, humanity that you speak so passionately to. We asked a group of our students what they really want to see in their leaders in the future. And they talked about humanity, they talked about honesty, they talked about integrity. And I just want to read one of the quotes, that the leaders of the future should be concerned about people through shared humanity and not just shared national, religious, and political identity. And I think about your poetry and the message and overall taking it together, it speaks so beautifully to that hope for the future.
It's a beautiful hope,
Yeah.
right? I think it speaks to the thing that is most fragile and most, inspiring and fulfilling that we all have. It has less to do with, power and these artificial structures and, something that to me feels so real. I love that. I get excited because I feel like this generation is going to do right.
Well, I think you and I both have a tremendous gift, and that is, I think we are with young people. And with that, we see that hope, and they have it, and they show it to us every day, and how fortunate we are. Yeah. So, Tracy K. Smith, thank you.
Thank you.
You are, how fortunate we are to have you as our poet laureate. How fortunate we have to have you as a person who is really exposing the country to poetry in new and different ways. And we need you.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.